Pax Americana. What is it? Well, the title is quite self-explanatory. American peace. And what do they mean by American peace? How is this practically applied? Well, it's quite simple. As long as America dominates the world, you will have a relatively, not completely, but a relatively peaceful world. And the idea is that as long as America runs the world, America will keep the bad guys in check, keep the troublesome countries in control, and will provide a peaceful atmosphere, relatively speaking, to the world. Now, of course, people would dispute this. People are already disputing this. They've been disputing this for decades, disputing this idea of Pax Americana. And they'll say, well, if Pax Americana is even legitimate, then why has there been so much violence in the Middle East? America invaded the Middle East and has brought nothing but brutality and destruction and terrorism and terrorist atrocities to the Middle East. And that's actually, obviously, a legitimate point. It's a legitimate observation. Which is why, or really one of the reasons why, the idea of Pax Americana is greatly declining. Americans have lost, for the most part, because you're always going to have people who will believe in the idea of American empire, but Americans, by and large, have rejected this idea of the United States being the world's police force. Americans, by and large, have lost all enthusiasm about the idea of America running the world. You would be very hard-pressed to find an American who believes in the idea of Pax Americana. It's a very small minority of Americans who believe that America should go to war with anybody. So the idea of America going to war is extremely unpopular, and the majority opinion, the great majority of the American population is extremely against the idea of America going to war with anybody. Not just Russia, with anybody. Unless, of course, we have some Pearl Harbor type event that happens. Americans don't care about war or American empire or anything like that. So there was an interesting article that was published today by Foreign Policy, and it was about major insurance companies being extremely hesitant, or really extremely unwilling, to insure the operations of various companies in Ukraine. And also being very unwilling to insure ships moving products from and to Ukraine. And the article's point was that this could be used by the Russians to devastate Ukraine's economy, because Ukraine relies heavily on its shipping economy. Ukraine is a major transit hub, simply for the fact that it's right on the Black Sea. You could take one port on Ukraine's coast on the Black Sea, and that one port will have literally tens of millions of tons of products being shipped from and to Ukraine. That's how vital Ukraine's shipping apparatus is to its economy. And if you cut Ukraine off from international shipping, then you would just destroy its economy. And so the article, though, it had something interesting in the end, and that was that this is really a sign of the death of Pax Americana. The publication, Foreign Policy, they interviewed this lady named Laura Burns, and she is a senior vice president at the insurance broker WTW. And she and her team looked at 60 different insurers that in recent years would have been very willing to insure business operations in Ukraine. But now, out of those 60 insurers, only 3 are willing to insure business operations in Ukraine. Just 3 out of the 60. And so Laura Burns made an interesting observation regarding Pax Americana. She said that in the 1990s and also in the first 15 years of this century, quote, companies went out all over the world. Now they have chess pieces in all these places and are realizing that risk levels are not what they once were. In fact, that the risk levels are in some cases dramatically different. We're not in the Pax Americana era anymore. And so this is it's a quite an astute observation. You see, people, they think, oh, the world's so peaceful now. They don't really realize that it's peaceful because America runs the world. America is controlling most of the world, except for Russia. You could say China, but I mean, Walmart could shut China's economy down. So I'm not going to really include China. And as long as America runs the world, America is the big empire. America is the big dog. But if America is no longer an empire, other countries that were once empires in the past are going to revive. I've said this a million times. Turkey, Japan, Germany, these countries would revive. And Turkey has already been reviving with its expansion in the Middle East, expansion into North Africa, and with its really geopolitical expansion into the South Caucasus, in Azerbaijan, Nagorno-Karabakh specifically, through the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict between Armenians and Azeris. And so you're already seeing it. You're already seeing the signs. And one thing that this whole conflict, because it is a conflict, this conflict between Russia and Ukraine has revealed is how the United States has lost all enthusiasm to be involved in foreign policy, to be involved in other countries. So, for example, The Atlantic put out an article today, and it was about how the idea of America going to war with Russia, really with anybody for that matter, is so unpopular you would be hard-pressed to find an American who would support such an idea. And the article talks about how this senator named Todd Young, Republican senator of Indiana, how he talked about how America needs to send troops into Eastern Europe. And the article talks about how when The Atlantic questioned Mr. Young about what he really wanted to do and asked him if he wants to send troops to defend Ukraine, Young told The Atlantic, quote, if Putin moves forward with an invasion of Ukraine, our NATO allies, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, and Romania, will be on the front lines against Russia. So this gives us kind of an insight as to what America is willing to do in case of a war between Russia and Ukraine, and how America is now really relying on the Europeans to do the war efforts against the Russians. America wants to use Europe as a proxy against Russia. And that's why I think the Trump administration really, really pressed hard on the Europeans to pay for their own defense. And Trump's rhetoric was pretty explicit. It was, why are we paying the money for the defense of these European countries? Why do we care anymore? Who really cares about the European Union? Like, Trump really was quite blatant about his view on Europe. But his opinion was, it reflected the general opinion of the American population, and that is, we don't care about the rest of the world. So Europe is going to rise up, specifically Germany, because Germany is the economic powerhouse of Europe. So as America relies on Europe, the Germans are going to take this as an opportunity to increase their military. See, I don't think America is going to go to war with Russia. That would be suicidal for both countries. But what is going to happen is a ripple effect towards Russia's neighbors. So you're going to see Ukrainian nationalism increase as Russia's imperialist efforts get more clout, or as Russia's foreign policy gets more and more militaristic or more intense. You will see Ukrainian nationalism increase. And also, as Russia rises, you're going to see Germany rise in militarism as well. Remember, when Russia annexed Crimea and when Russia was in a proxy war with Ukrainians in Donbass, the Germans were talking about how they need to increase their military capabilities, and they pointed to the Russians as their reason. So you're going to be seeing the rise in Germany and also an increase in Ukrainian nationalism. And that's the ripple effect that we're seeing. And this is all really the result of the end of Pax Americana. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.